If you grew up playing Minecraft Xbox 360 Edition, you might have gotten an unsettling feeling at times. Maybe it was from exploring caves late at night, hearing eerie cave noises, or even the fear of Herobrine. All of those things added on to this unsettling nature that this game kind of brought to us. I wanted to explore some of those things in this video, and what makes this version so scary. I touched on some of the things that make this version unsettling in my last video, and since then I've gotten a lot of feedback from all of you, and I wanted to revisit this version and go more in depth about what makes this version disturbing and creepy. The first thing I want to talk about is more of the tutorial worlds. There's only a handful that they made for this game, and each of them had certain things about them that kind of made them strange and unsettling. The later ones not so much, but the earlier ones are kind of odd. The first one here is the TU11 tutorial world, and I think besides the first one, this one might be kind of the most creepiest one. And that's mainly due to a few things. This desert temple is kind of one of them. As you kind of walk down, it's not what you expect. It's different. It's almost like a mirrored version of the one you're used to. The one thing that I really feel about all these tutorial worlds is the sense of not being alone. You didn't build all these structures. So it kind of gets your imagination thinking, like, who built these structures and where are they now? And it makes you feel like you might not be the only one around here. And if you look hard enough, you might find one of the builders around in this world. There's a few things in this tutorial world I wanted to quickly bring up. One of those things is this house over here. It's kind of your average Minecraft house, but that kind of adds to that feeling that, someone else built this. It really seems like it's player built. And that's the scary thing about these early versions. Especially with the rise of, Herobrine and creepypastas like that. It feels like anyone could have built this. And this basement down here, too, it's just like this shrine. It seems kind of creepy. One of the more odd things in this tutorial world is kind of the underwater house thing that's over here. I don't know, it seems kind of out of place amid, the more normal structures. Kind of strange because it seems like it would be like a shelter of sorts, but the only thing inside is a chest. There's no beds, there's no crafting tables, nothing to survive down here. It's just a chest with some things for you inside. And, with these older textures and stuff, you can't even, see outside. The water is so dense. You just see it streaming down the glass. So if there is something in the water, you wouldn't even be able to tell. While we're kind of walking through this area, I just wanted to talk about something I actually didn't really know about until someone commented about it, which I'll put on screen. And that's in the most recent tutorial world. There's this very strange area underneath the ice, which is this sunken kind of training area, I guess. It's apart from the previous tutorial world, the one that came before it, and it's kind of scary swimming through it. I'll put some footage up on screen. You get a really weird feeling going throughout that area. It feels like you're swimming through this forgotten world, this forgotten city, and it's a really interesting thing that they added, something I didn't know about. But here's another kind of place in this tutorial world that is a little disturbing. It's kind of this ruined underground little temple area. And I still kind of get that feeling that there's someone around. Another thing I kind of want to touch on is the eeriness of peaceful mode. I'm actually playing on peaceful in this world right now because I kind of feel like it adds to that terror and that feeling that you're not alone. Obviously, you are in peaceful. You're the most alone in peaceful mode than any of the other game modes. But that loneliness kind of gets you thinking. and it starts messing with your brain a little bit. Where you expect to find mobs like deep underground and caves, all you're met with is silence. So you start to think, is there something watching me? Is there something around? It kind of puts you more on edge, I think. There's a really great video that I'll link in the description that goes over the horror of peaceful mode. But he makes a really good comparison between terror and horror. And I think peaceful mode really brings you more terror than horror does. You know, terror is that feeling of anticipation, that something is going to be there. There's a little cross. It's always creepy finding these as well. In peaceful mode, you know, you anticipate finding monsters and things, but you never end up actually seeing any. So where you expect to see, you know, the normal things in Minecraft, they're just not there. That's strange. Is that a sapling on the ground? Okay. Terror usually leads into the feeling of horror. And with horror, you know, you kind of get that relief because that anticipation is over. Like, you've already seen what that, you know, the horror is. In peaceful mode, you just have that constant feeling of terror, that constant anticipation, and there's never anything. You're just alone and isolated. There's another cross down there. Well, kind of. I always find these things, and it always creeps me out more and more. I really recommend giving that video a watch. It's really well done, and really goes into more depth about that, the creepiness of peaceful mode. Another thing I kind of wanted to briefly just talk about, I don't really want to go too much in depth into this, just because it's, you know, not something it's not something really related to the Xbox 360 edition, but it's related enough where I thought it would be good to mention, and that's the disappearance of Minecraft Story Mode. For those of you who don't know what Minecraft Story Mode is, it was a decision-based Minecraft game made by Telltale, who made a lot of the like Walking Dead games, and I can't remember exactly when, but the game basically just vanished off the stores. There was no mention of it. You couldn't buy it anywhere digitally. The only place you could actually get it is if you had it on like a physical copy. There's very few games that have kind of done that. And for a game like Minecraft, you know, a huge IP like that, it's very interesting. Complete snap, and it's gone. But I don't really want to go too much in depth about that because it's not really related to the Xbox 360 edition. But just thought it was worth mentioning. One thing I actually have experienced myself is what I call the nightmare glitch. I know it's kind of prominent on some of the beta versions of the game. I've seen a few people talk about it. Another kind of thing it's called is like the monsters under the bed, which I think is kind of interesting. But it's basically this glitch where, or it was a feature, I'm not really too sure, but when you would fall asleep with little to no light nearby, like a monster would spawn, usually a zombie or a skeleton. They could spawn and, you know, wake you up and attack you. And it just spooked you. It was like a jump scare, right? And it's one of the few things in the actual game that you can really classify was scary, you know? Like, you never expected it. Something else that was kind of exclusive to these older versions and, you know, Xbox 360 edition in particular was the Bedrock Fog, which they eventually kind of made into a toggle on and off feature and then eventually just removed it entirely. But it was this feature where, you know, when you're down near bedrock, you could, you know, have this kind of fog, and it would roll in when you're deep underground and kind of obscure your vision. But yeah, I guess it wasn't really liked by the fan base, maybe because of the, you know, if you wanted to build down there, it would obscure your build and stuff. Another kind of exclusive feature about the Xbox 360 edition were the mashup packs. And, these range from a lot of things like, like a Greek mythology mashup pack to, Adventure Time and stuff like that. I wanted to touch on a few of the kind of creepy things in some of these mashup packs. One of them I actually learned about from a comment from one of you guys. I'll talk about that first. So, in the holiday mashup pack, there is, this large tree in the kind of center of the, main area you spawn in. But if you dig into that tree, there is a ladder that heads down. And this ladder leads you into this very long, eerie tunnel that goes on for probably about, like, a few hundred blocks. I don't know, I kind of felt this eerie feeling going through. It's just a very kind of unsettling little place in this very joyful world. The other mashup pack I wanted to mention is the Halloween mashup pack. And obviously this pack is meant to be kind of spooky, but not in really an actual kind of spooky, scary way. There's one thing that was more prominently unsettling about this mashup pack, and that was the inclusion of real-life kind of horror figures and creepypastas in some of the paintings. The two that I can remember off the top of my head were the paintings of Slender Man, and the other one was a one-by-one painting of I believe it was the girl from The Grudge. It could have been the girl from The Ring too, I can't remember. I think that was a little eerie, kind of adding those elements of real-life horror into that map of kind of, more like silly fun horror, I guess. It just added that little sense of uncertainty. Alright, now I wanted to get into more of the community-created things in this version. And one of those things that I'm really eager to talk about that I didn't know about before someone mentioned it in the comments. I went on this big deep dive into it, and that's the story of Casey's Cave. For those of you who don't know what this is, it was an original creepypasta made, I think, like 12, 13 years ago, around now, that was pretty popular back in the day, but became kind of the building ground for one of the biggest pieces of lost media in the Minecraft community, which I'll kind of get into a little later. But I wanted to touch on that original creepypasta first, because I think it's very unique, and it's not your average kind of like Herobrine, Entity 303 kind of creepypasta. It's actually really interesting, and I was kind of surprised by the direction it took. But basically, it's the story of this player who found this strange cave in his world. In this cave, he kind of felt very unsettled. Eventually, he saw this humanoid woman with very long hair covering her face, very similar to the girl from The Ring. That's how he described it. And it wasn't like a blocky character. No, this was like actually humanoid. At least that's the way I perceive it in the story, which I think makes that so much more terrifying, because all of the other kind of creepypastas, they're all kind of set in the style of Minecraft. Like Entity 303, Null, Herobrine, all those kind of, classic Minecraft creepypastas, they're all set in that style of, a blocky figure. But this being like an actual humanoid character in this world, it's very, very interesting. And I found that like to be the most unique part about that story. But anyways, he sees this girl in this cave. I mean, to be fair, this dude was freaking out, and it attacked him. As he got out of the cave, she followed and killed him. The very interesting thing is that when he died in the game, when he respawned, he was the tennis Steve skin, what the second player skin would be, as in split screen. And the way he kind of described it in that creepypasta is that she took Steve, which I think was a very interesting direction. That she kind of stole that character, that skin, from him, which I think was very, very cool. But basically, he went back to the cave, sealed it off with wood, and named it Casey's Cave, which is, kind of named that woman that was in there, Casey. And He said never to enter again. That story kind of evolves more. He made more parts of that story, but you know, they're not as great. But that story kind of became the footing ground for a series called Casey's Cave Entry. It was inspired by that original creepypasta, and I think it had about 12 parts or something, which kind of went into its own direction, except for the main basis of, you know, this woman being in this cave and obviously being named Casey. The main story was that this group of friends were, you know, trying to explore more and more of Casey's cave to find 11 discs that gave more information on who Casey was and how to stop her. Unfortunately, the entire series is now lost media. It was originally posted by, I can't remember the username, but I'll put up on screen. There have been a few people in the community that have been trying to find those lost episodes, and there's only a few kind of pieces of, I guess, footage left. There's a few screenshots, I believe, and then there's a few pieces of footage from someone else's kind of coverage of that series. It has like their logo on it and everything, so it's kind of obstructed, but the actual like pure footage is gone. It's lost media. Now, as I said, I did not know about either of these things before someone commented on my last video about it, and the person who commented is actually one of the kind of leading people that has been trying to uncover more and more about the series. If you want to learn more about it and kind of go in more depth about what the series is, what kind of information there is left, I would recommend checking out his channel and checking out kind of the videos he has posted, the playlists he has of what's left. The most interesting thing about this, however, is that if you try to search up the original channel, you'll get no results. But people were able to find in a description of another video that channel is now Scare Theater 2. Those of you who don't know, Scare Theater is a very popular kind of horror channel on YouTube. Scare Theater made Casey's Cave Entry, which is very interesting. Kind of sad that we'll probably never actually get to see the original series. Well, I guess since we're on the topic of caves, another thing I really was interested by that I didn't mention in my last video were Mineshafts. Mineshafts themselves aren't necessarily scary, but they are unsettling at times. You know, I've always kind of caught myself looking back a few times in those long hallways because I hear like a cave noise or footsteps that are just mine, but I always feel like there might be someone else's. You know, it's mainly those tight corners and being surrounded by dense stone, and the only way out is to dig up. The main thing about Mineshafts that I found very interesting is that while you explore Mineshafts, you find ores in the walls still. There's always ores left behind. This kind of, you know, got a lot of people thinking, why were there still ores in the walls? And this raises a really interesting question. What were they mining for? Why were there all of these mine shafts underneath your world, and why are they there? Obviously, from a gameplay point of view, they're there because, you know, easy resources to find, loot to find, but, you know, more like lore-wise, it really gets you thinking. You know, these ancient people that were here before created these mine shafts and these other structures. Why were they mining deep below ground only to leave the ores behind? Were they trying to escape the surface? Were they trying to find something? It really gets you thinking. Anyways, back to the kind of more community created things. There's a really well done ARG that's not completely connected to the Xbox 360 edition, but has many callbacks to it, and I wanted to mention it because it's a really well done series, and I think it stretches the boundaries further than just horror, and it really has a deep message behind it. I also have to thank another one of my viewers for commenting this and kind of inspiring me to talk about this. That's the Andrew Gaming 67 channel. It's kind of basically this story about a player named Andrew kind of reminiscing over his time with his friend named Chris. who has gone missing. And I don't really want to spoil too much of the story. If you haven't already given it a watch, I'll link it in the description, and I'll also link a really well done kind of deep dive video into it. I'm not completely caught up with the series because there's been more stuff that's come out recently, but I'm going to go into a little bit of the story, so if you don't want to get spoiled, skip this part. I'll put a timestamp to skip past this, but basically, Andrew begins to find more and more of his friends' builds in the world, and he kind of reminisces over his time with Chris. But as he's kind of making these videos, looking through these older builds from, you know, the Xbox 360 days, he begins to notice dark figures in the woods, kind of off screen, just in the background. And he kind of starts to get freaked out a little bit. And it's eventually kind of revealed that the figures he's been seeing, at least one of them, is Chris, and is part of his game now. It's a really well done story, but basically, it's revealed that Chris took his own life in a well. He is basically trapped in Andrew's game now. Or not trapped, but he's in Andrew's game, and he's trying to connect with him. There's a lot of horror elements, but eventually the story leans more deep down into strong roots of friendship and, you know, that bond. But yeah, like in the videos, they call back a lot to a lot of the Xbox 360 features, such as he visits the festive mashup pack and also a few of the old tutorial worlds as well. But like everything else I've mentioned in this video, I would highly recommend you giving it a watch, watching a breakdown. One of the last things I want to talk about is something I didn't mention in my last video. I did mention Herobrine, so I have to mention these two, and that is Entity 303 and Null. They're not as big as Herobrine was, but I did want to mention them because they were a big part of the later years of Xbox 360's reign, and they had a big part in the horror community. By the way, I'm not a fan of either of these. I think they're kind of lazy. I don't think they're very well done, but I still want to cover them because they're a big part of the game, so. But Entity 303 was, you know, the most similar to Herobrine out of the two, but like I said, he wasn't nearly as popular, nor was his story nearly as compelling. Disappearance was this white hooded figure with kind of a shadowy face and dark red eyes. From what I remember, his story was that he was like a hacker at Mojang. He hacked the game, and his goal was to ruin Minecraft by the end of 2014. I mean, it's nowhere near as compelling as Herobrine's story, because, you know, Herobrine was this like ghost in the game, right? Like a spirit that could haunt you at any time. Entity 303 was just some dude hacking into the game. You know, like, there's not much scary about that. Something I found kind of interesting when I was doing my research into him is that, like I said, his goal was to ruin Minecraft by the end of 2014. That's actually when Microsoft bought the game. So for you Entity 303 fans, you might say that he succeeded. I mean, for some people out there, maybe he did. Maybe he was real, and he succeeded in ruining Minecraft all along. Null, however, was a very different kind of story. But basically, Null was just this completely dark figure that can appear in your game. I think it's kind of silly because the main, like, plot point about him is that he was the true villain, or, like, the true terror of Minecraft, and Herobrine was the one that was actually trying to help you and trying to warn you about Null. So I think that's really silly, in my opinion. But anyways, their impact was made on Xbox 360 edition, but it was nowhere near the impact that Herobrine had. But I thought it would be good to mention them anyway. And that brings me to kind of the last thing I wanted to talk about, another community created thing, and that is this channel called TW, more specifically TW-JR8LU. It's this channel that has a few videos on it, and it's all videos of this player exploring each of the tutorial worlds. Each of the videos is kind of done in this eerie way. I'll play a bunch of footage over the screen, but it goes through each tutorial world in this kind of eerie way. Each video kind of gets more and more distorted. The first video starts off with, I believe, the TU-70 update world, or whichever the latest update world is, and he goes further and further back into the earlier versions, these cryptic messages begin to pop up throughout the video. I can't remember exactly what the messages say, but I'll put a few of them up on screen. After kind of the last few videos get uploaded, it's actually revealed it's not really much of a horror kind of series, but it's more of this farewell letter to the tutorial worlds, because most of them are lost to time now, and there's only a few you can legitimately go back to on the actual version of the game. It becomes kind of this heartwarming and nostalgic message to those old tutorial worlds, and I thought it was fitting to mention because that's where we are right now. Yeah, I recommend giving them a watch because I think those series of videos are a pretty nice look at these old versions and the nostalgia that this game brought to a lot of us. I think that's basically all I wanted to talk about. There's a lot of great, creepy and unsettling and disturbing things about this version, and I'm sure there's more that you will let me know in the comments. That's mainly everything I wanted to talk about. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you haven't watched the previous video, I would highly recommend giving that a watch as well, and everything I've mentioned in this video too. I'll link it all in the description. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye now.